Hey, good morning, Rogersville. Thanks for joining us once again on the Friday show. I'm Will Worsham. This is Cassie Dowden, as always. Joining us this week, we're privileged to have State Senator Eric Burlison.
It's good to be here.
Good. It's good to have you
really
here.
an honor. It's really,
The coffee is fantastic.
Yeah. We're blessed to have a nice coffee shop at Storytime Coffee right down the road, right down the hall here.
Right next door, pretty much,
So,
yeah.
Seriously, Eric, thanks for taking the time to come in and
Very
visit
cool.
with us real quick. So what's going on? What's going on with you right now?
A lot.
yeah, I kind of figured.
Where to start?
Yeah. So, I've been the state senator for 3 years now. Before that, I was a state rep. And I represent this area, the Greene County side of Rogersville. And I am stepping in to run for U.S. Congress.
Yeah.
And so that is taking up all of my time.
I'll bet it is. Yeah, that's almost more than a full-time job right there.
It is. It is. I like last night. I was in Webb City. Got home at about 10, 11 o'clock at night, and so that's my typical day. Then get up.
And then I
7
texted
o'clock
you,
in
and
the
I'm like,
morning.
"Don't forget, you gotta be at our place
in Rogersville." So it's fun though. I think that when you're running for something like this, the best way to approach it is to have fun with it and realize this is a life experience. To me, there's more things than winning to running a campaign, right?
Right. And I've always thought too, when you get to be a candidate, whether you win or not, you have a platform that you get to advance ideals. And you've always done a great job of that. And fortunately, you've always been really successful in your elections as well. And the other thing I've always appreciated about you, Eric, is I really think you still understand the concept of you're elected to be a servant of the people that have elected you. And you've always done a great job of representing the people that are from your district, as opposed to what we're now hearing in airports, which is the president has mandated.
Right.
And it's like, really? I didn't know presidents had that. I thought we fought a war over leaders mandating things.
Right. We had one king.
We had one. I think we have another one that wants to be king, certainly acting like one. But anyway, that's why I think you would be great to send from the 7th District. And so
thank you.
Glad to have you on here. You your big deal recently, of course, is a big victory with the Second Amendment Preservation Act. You were instrumental in making that happen. So
yeah, that as an attorney, you appreciate the history behind that concept of we're really utilizing something within the Constitution that court decisions that have been in place for hundreds of years since the first court decision, Prigg versus Pennsylvania. The courts have ruled that the supremacy clause can only go so far. So the federal government can have their own laws, but the supremacy clause doesn't say that whatever laws that the federal government passes, the states are responsible for enforcing.
right. Well, and Jen Psaki made an interesting statement about a week ago. She said, kind of in an offhand statement, well, we all know that federal law trumps state law. And I think a lot of us went, oh, really? That's news to a lot of us.
Right.
Yeah.
And so while, the supremacy clause says that the federal government has its laws and the state can't, we can't undo their law. What has been decided again and again throughout history is that the federal government can't come down here and say to our local law enforcement, whom we pay, that our taxpayer dollars pay, that they have to do the work of the federal government, right?
Yeah, if they want to pass a law, they want to enforce it, then they need to be the ones that do it.
Right. And so that's what we're doing with the Second Amendment Preservation Act. We're simply saying that, look, our local law enforcement, Roy Cole here in Webster County and Sheriff Arnott in Greene, that we pay for their taxes. We pay the taxes that pay their salaries and their employee salaries. And same thing with our local police. Our tax dollars are paying their salaries, and we kind of covet their resources. Their resources are important to us. And when we have thefts in this area, we have, whatever it is, violent crime that occurs in this area, we want them focused on that.
Right.
Exactly.
And not to be commandeered to do whatever flavor of the day idea that Biden's got about grabbing guns and taking away or knocking on the door of domestic terrorists because you went and spoke at a school board meeting.
Right. Yeah, no kidding.
And so SEPA is really the first of, I think, what could be a trend where we're pushing back against the federal government. And basically, and I said it at the press conference, this is us telling President Biden to go pound sand. We are not going to participate in an unconstitutional gun grab if this is what your intentions are. And I think his executive order to round up pistol braces was, that's a gun grab.
Yeah, well, they've not even been ruled that you can't have them. I mean, there's no law that says there's anything wrong with them. That's his idea. So, he might as well say, go around and round up everybody's crutches. We don't want people using crutches anymore because they might hit somebody with them.
Right.
People need that to walk. It's essentially a device to assist somebody that needs some help.
So this SEPA bill has gotten a lot of national attention. We passed it this last year, and then the New York Times did a piece about it. They obviously don't like the idea.
Really? I'm really surprised about that.
And then the Chicago Tribune did a story about it. They didn't like the idea either.
Really?
Right. And then 60 Minutes called. And so I did a story with 60 Minutes this last week.
How did that go?
So when they called, they said, well, where's a good venue to do this story? I said, let's go to Black Rain Ordnance in Neosho, Missouri, and which is a place that they don't just sell firearms; they manufacture AR-15s. In the heart of Southwest Missouri, this is a place that employs over 100 people in an area where there's not a lot of jobs that are non-farming, right? And so it's fantastic to have that kind of work in that area, and I wanted them to see this culture and for them to see what it's like in flyover country, right? So basically all these New York people flew in and drove down to Neosho and then filmed us walk through the manufacturing facility, got to see what it was like for people in Missouri, and then we took them out back and. When they said, can we film you shooting a firearm? I said, I will if you will.
Yes.
I will because I want you to understand what it's like to shoot a firearm.
Right.
Let me guess, they didn't
And
take you up on it.
he said, I would be willing to do it.
Wow.
So, but when he got down here, he said, well, because of legal reasons, he kind of waffled on it.
Really?
Legal reasons.
But
I was about to say the same thing, legal
I
reasons.
didn't
Really?
care. I still let him. I fired down range. I don't.
Sure.
You know what? If they want to try to cast me as some knuckle dragging redneck, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because you know what? That's their view, but I'm going to be who I am. And
Well, language is important to me, and so I've had my own little private crusade to make sure people understand that Southwest Missouri, our area, we're not rednecks. We are hillbillies, and there's there's a difference. I mean, we're all closely related. We're all country folk, But, rednecks, that's a little farther south. That's my friend, Jace Robertson. He was up here to see me a couple weeks ago. He's a redneck, but, and Jace and I had the conversation, but we're hillbillies here. It's a little different flavor. Not sure it's pro or con.
I was going to say, which one's better? I don't even know.
I don't know. But I think there's way more rednecks than there are hillbillies. So we'll claim this. But we have our West Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky hillbilly cousins that are a different flavor of hillbilly than we are around here.
Very true.
But it's all good stuff. Well, that's good work, Eric. I appreciate you.
Yes.
Carrying the banner.
So we'll see how much they try to spin that story.
Yeah.
They want to try to cast it as it's anti-law enforcement, right? So they don't because the bill basically says you can't commandeer our law enforcement, and to do that, we really had to thread the needle and make sure that what we were doing is saying, if you want to help us enforce Missouri laws, you're welcome to come in and help us do that. But when it comes to enforcing your laws, the only way we're going to do that is if someone has violated a Missouri law.
Right. And I think that's an important distinction that a lot of people don't understand because, actually this is a very pro-law enforcement law because it protects our law enforcement because most of them don't want to enforce federal law.
True.
But I know there was a little bit of concern like, well, are we going to get in trouble if
Right.
if we accidentally enforce a federal law in the process of enforcing a Missouri law? And as you just explained, nothing could be farther from the truth. It's the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, in fact, we want to make it clear that if if I was in their shoes, I'd really want one set of rules to go by and not be worried about which layer of law I have to, and what the Venn diagram is, if you will, right?
Right.
Exactly.
If anything, we're just saying, hey, your role is to enforce Missouri law, period.
Yep.
And if someone has violated Missouri law, then you can throw the book at them, right? Because that's what we want. We want to enforce criminal activity. We want our law enforcement to focus on what we decide here in Missouri because, all politics should be local and you should be able to focus on one set of laws.
Speaking of local politics, and we did not discuss this ahead of time, so feel free to say I'll look into it. But our little Jamestown area here is I don't want to say struggling because it's actually recovering quite well. But we've got this weird situation with Greene County, and they own it, but all of that. Are you familiar with it?
Yes, very.
Okay.
Oh, well, look at that. He came ready.
Yeah, and you've got some really great advocates. So J.R. Hutchison, I sat down with him and his sister, and we discussed this area in great detail. And while I don't have direct control, it got me they convinced me to be an advocate for them and for this community, and because they're right. This whole project, I'm not trying to step on any toes, but as a free market, capitalist,
You can say it. You can say capitalist here. It's okay.
This is
This is a safe place.
This is a safe place for capitalists.
I think this is an example of what government should not be doing. Government should never have, gotten involved in this project. But since they did,
Now they need to get out.
they need to get out of
as
it
fast as they can.
because
yeah.
and let the free market come in because right now I think that from what I understand, the reason why some of the property is not being bought up is because it still has debt on it. They don't want to end up upside down. And so at the end of the day, they just need to put it up for sale and let the market decide what the price of this property is, because there's people that would want to purchase this and develop this property.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that's happening now. We've had some meetings with the folks from Greene County, and they've got it listed for sale. I think there for a while it wasn't really, it wasn't being mowed. It was kind of growing up,
Right.
and they've taken care of that. So Greene County's been recently pretty responsive and get some of that done.
But when government owns something, there's often the tragedy of the commons that occurs, right? Because nobody really benefits from the value of that. And so you really have to prod government to
We did a little prodding. Some prodding occurred.
No, that doesn't sound like you.
Yeah, right. And so it got moved along, but that was good.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm curious what we're going to do about just jobs and people getting back to work. I mean, do you have any insight on what the plan is?
Well, first you have to stop incentivizing people from not working.
Absolutely.
So people, I mean, when you look at what happened with Russia, think about the failure of communism, and you think of the bread lines, right? Well, what was happening? You had people that had money but they had no products to buy. So here we are in America. We've had a mini experiment here with socialism and communism, because you've had a moment in our time where we paid people to not work, and now here's the result. You have
people not working.
Yeah, people are not working, and then you can't buy anything, right? And so when you literally have stores like, I love Qdoba, and I can't go get, you get in line, for a while there was one poor guy working there he was not a millennial. So he was either an owner or just a responsible individual. And I felt so bad for him. Well, eventually the store closes, right? And that's happening across the area. And so, and that's also happening at manufacturing level, which is why you're not able to buy the products and the goods that you really want or need. And you're seeing stores start to, items on shelves not be there. So
it's a weird feeling, seeing it all.
And then the result is that businesses are having to jack up their prices. So what items that are available to be sold, they have to sell it for more.
Right.
And then to produce those items, you have to pay more to get people to get in the door to start working again. So now we're experiencing inflation, hyperinflation. So, and what's really sad is even Janet Yellen, like, these people supposedly are the ones that are supposed to know what's going on. And within 6 months, she's had to adjust what their expected inflation was going to be for this year, right? So every time she appears before Congress, she's adjusting what they realize now inflation is going to be for the coming year. And it's not good, right?
Well, and I mean, I'm not an economist by a long shot. I have an English literature degree. I went to law school. But, I mean, some of these things seem obviously predictable. I mean, if you increase what you're paying people not to work, that's now a competitor to an employer. So by de facto, you are increasing wages, which is what they want. So it's like a minimum wage without passing a minimum wage law. The idea that a minimum wage of any kind does not produce inflation is pure fantasy. I mean, it inherently does. You're increasing the cost of producing and delivering a product whenever you increase the minimum wage. And somehow there's this dream that, corporations won't raise prices. They'll just eat that expense.
And
it's never going to happen.
Never.
And you can't make it happen.
Right.
It's a huge hit to the middle class. It's not a hit to the wealthy. Because if you are used to, if you're a billionaire, paying twice for the price of a meal doesn't really matter.
Right.
But if you're a middle class family, doubling the amount that it costs you to go out to eat or to even go to the grocery store, that's a huge hit. Doubling the amount that it costs you to go purchase fuel at the pump is a huge hit. And so people are feeling it.
Well, it's a shell game, because you increase somebody's wages. What you really do is tangentially, you increase the amount of taxes that they're paying. So it's a boon for the government. So the government has an incentive to do this because government wants more money. My real question is, what do you think the odds are of repealing the 16th Amendment?
Oh, that's a jump.
Well, I got there. But you know what? Ultimately, that's where the problem started.
Yeah, this is awesome. I love this conversation. So I'm with you. I think the worst time in American history, or the pivot point, was 1913.
Agreed.
Because
February 3rd.
Because the American government, or the culture back then, was just on this. They were hell bent to go the way of socialism, and we made some strategic mistakes that changed the course of American history forever. The first was the 16th Amendment, which allowed directly the federal government to start taxing your income directly. Prior to that, they didn't.
It was unconstitutional.
Yeah, it was unconstitutional. The only way that the federal government made any money was on tariffs, right? And then they also would come hat in hand to the legislatures of each state, and the U.S. senators would be the ones that would do this. They would come and say, "Hey, here's our proposed budget. Mm-hmm. What do you think? And if you buy into this, then please send the check to the federal government." So the states were the ones writing the check and telling the federal government what to do.
Beautiful.
Like,
You're like,
right?
that's how it needs to be, right?
And that's how it was for over 100 years of American history. And it worked pretty well.
Wow.
And we grew to be this, a superpower that way. Then they created the income tax after 1913.
At 1%.
It was 1%.
1%.
And
So, it
so,
was temporary.
Yeah, it wasn't going to be permanent.
Yeah, supposed to be, yeah.
And I don't even think that it was taxed on your wages. It was taxed on what you and I would call capital gains.
Oh, really?
Right.
I didn't know that part. Yeah.
And it was on super wealthy, right? So the threshold was very high. So it's obviously changed since 1913. The other thing that happened in 1913 is that they passed the 17th Amendment of the Constitution, which changed the way that U.S. senators are elected. So prior to that time, people like right now we have an election for U.S. Senate. Billy Long is running for U.S. Senate. All of these people are running to replace Roy Blunt. They wouldn't have been running around the state trying to make people happy and get them to vote for them. They would have been trying to make Jefferson City happy.
The representatives.
Right, because prior to 1913, the states appointed someone to represent the state and the state's interest in D.C. And so it was, in a way, the United States was very much like the way we view the United Nations today, right? So each state was basically a sovereign entity, right? And so each state was kind of a sovereign entity. They governed their own affairs, and they sent someone to represent their interest in D.C., and then we would send whatever money we wanted to Washington, D.C. After 1913, we truly became this monster nation, and the reason why we are going into debt and accelerating ourselves into spending is because Congress really is just everyone in Congress is trying to get elected, and the way to do that is just to spend more money and make people happy by spending more money to buy votes.
Well, and sort of to not really change the subject, but kind of with the system, like when, you do have people that need help, from the government, welfare, or I don't really know all the lingo, but when you do need help, the system is broken because there are so many people that abuse the system, and there's a new show on Netflix. It's called Made. And I guess it was a book first. My sister-in-law told me that, but I watched the Netflix show, and this poor girl is like on her own, and she really needs help. She's in a terrible relationship. She's now a single mom, and there's just all these red flags and loopholes that you got to jump through. And it's really sad because there are people out there that really do need the help, but then you've got all the other people that are just abusing the system and living off of it. And I don't know, there's really, I don't know if there's really an answer.
There is, but whenever you take the control locally and move it off to somewhere else, you can't have an eyeball-to-eyeball conversation with somebody. You have to put in all this red tape, paperwork, and loopholes instead of having somebody sit across the desk from you and say, "What's your situation? Let me help you."
Right.
Yeah, the charity, we forget that charity is real. Charity exists, and what we've done is by funneling it through government, it no longer is charity. It becomes these government entitlements. But the truth is, it's just forced charity. So government is taking money out of your pocket.
Otherwise known as stealing.
Right. And then they are being charitable with your money. And they don't really care how it's spent.
Right.
They don't care. There's no one really caring. There's no bureaucrat that is making sure that the money is being wisely utilized and that they're getting the best use out of those precious resources. They just check the box because that's their job.
Right. Well, it's just infuriating to me, that people are just they find the loopholes to live off of the system, and then it breaks down for everybody else, and then then you have massive people living off the government, which is what the government wants. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So, and that leads me to my next question. Somebody like me that I don't have a lot of money to invest in a campaign and all I can do is vote. What else can we do, just to get involved or to make a difference to help that change?
Well, I think all politics is local. I truly think that this is a Republican system, and I don't mean that like the Republican Party. I mean, we're not a democracy, and that needs to be spread. Some people think that we're a democracy. You pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, right? And so there's a difference, and what that really truly means is that just voting is not enough. And every citizen should know that your job is to pay attention to what's going on and to constantly be in contact with your elected officials and let them know what your opinions are. And I one of my favorite speeches is when I tell little kids how much political power they have. Mm-hmm. That they may not be able to vote, but that most political power is not in the vote. It's all the time, all the 364 days of the year that there isn't an election. When you're contacting your legislator, you're sending them letters, you're calling them, or you ask them to come have coffee, and you give them your opinion. People don't realize how much political power they have. But an engaged citizen, when you actually see the rare, and it happens very rarely, someone starts getting active and getting involved. And I'll tell you, as an elected official, you start paying attention to those people who are active, whether they're active on social media or in brick and mortar, right? Mm-hmm. Like JR, and his impact is fantastic, right? Because he took the time to call me and say, hey, come down, let's have coffee and let's talk about what's going on in Rogersville. That's unbelievably impactful. And that moment, just that 1 hour lunch, has benefited the entire community, right?
Yep. Eric, this has been a wonderful conversation. I've had a great time. I could talk to you for probably a couple hours like this, but and you've reached 5 whole people this morning, I think, and so
fantastic.
No, this will get watched over and over again throughout the week and stuff like that. So, but anyway, thank you for taking your time to come in. I sincerely want to invite you anytime you want to come back and just talk to the people. People in Rogersville watch K-ROG generally, so we can talk to Rogersville people. Yes. But anytime you'd like to come on, you're welcome. Come in. We'd love to have you. But thanks for joining us.
It's been awesome.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll see everybody else later, and maybe Eric and sometime soon. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah.